My name is Madeline, 32 years old, a single interior designer living in Seattle. The frantic doorbell at 5:30 in the morning was just the beginning of my nightmare. There sat my 78-year-old grandmother, Eleanor, on a wheelchair, with a few hastily packed bags abandoned at my doorstep. The shock quickly turned to rage when I realized my parents had literally dumped her like trash. All because my unemployed brother Kyle, their golden boy, needed her room to move in with his new girlfriend. Before I tell you how I turned this horrific situation into one of life's most meaningful lessons, share in the comments if you've ever faced family favoritism. Hit like and subscribe to support women standing up for those they love. Family dynamics are complicated, but ours took favoritism to another level. My father Richard, 62, and my mother Patricia, 60, always prioritized my younger brother Kyle, who just turned 30 last month. Growing up, the pattern was painfully clear. Kyle received everything on a silver platter, while I had to fight for the basics. When college came around, my parents fully funded Kyle's education at an expensive private university. I still remember the day I received my acceptance letter to art school. Instead of celebration, my father handed me a loan application form. "We just paid Kyle's tuition. You'll have to figure this out on your own," he said without even looking up from his newspaper. I ended up working 2 jobs while studying, barely sleeping 4 hours each night just to make ends meet. The car situation was another glaring example. For Kyle's 18th birthday, my parents surprised him with a brand new Audi. My car was a 15-year-old Honda with nearly 200,000 miles that I saved for by working summers at the local coffee shop. When that Honda finally died during my senior year, my parents suggested I take the bus while they helped Kyle upgrade to an even nicer car because he needed to make a good impression at job interviews. Even as adults, the pattern continued. When Kyle lost his job 3 years ago, my parents immediately offered financial support, letting him live rent-free in their house for 8 months. When I struggled after starting my interior design business, their advice was to get a real job and stop chasing creative dreams. Through all of this, my grandmother Eleanor was my rock. She was the only person who saw me, truly saw me, and treated me with fairness and love. Unlike my parents, she celebrated my artistic talents and encouraged my passion for design. "Your creativity is a gift, Madeline," she would say, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Never let anyone convince you otherwise." Every Sunday since I was little, Grandma Eleanor and I had our special cooking tradition. We'd spend hours in her cozy kitchen, making everything from apple pies to elaborate pasta dishes, recipes passed down through generations. The kitchen walls were adorned with vintage cooking utensils and handmade quilts, each with its own story that Grandma loved to share. "This rolling pin belonged to my mother," she once told me while teaching me to make her famous cinnamon rolls. She used it during the toughest times to still bring sweetness to our table. Remember, Madeline, our ability to create beauty even in difficult circumstances is what defines us. It was Grandma Eleanor who introduced me to interior design. Her home was a testament to thoughtful decoration filled with carefully curated furniture and handcrafted items that made the space feel both elegant and inviting. She taught me how colors could change the feeling of a room and how the right arrangement could make even a small space feel expansive. "Spaces tell stories," she would say as we rearranged her living room furniture. "Your job is to make sure it's a story worth telling." Some of my most precious memories are the quiet afternoons spent with Grandma Eleanor as she shared stories of her youth. I learned how she met my grandfather at a dance in 1965, how they saved for years to buy their first home, and how she started a small sewing business while raising my father. "Women in my generation weren't supposed to be entrepreneurs," she told me once, her voice strong despite her aging body. "But I believed spaces should be both beautiful and functional, so I made it happen anyway." Grandma Eleanor possessed a quiet strength that I always admired. Even after my grandfather passed away 10 years ago, she maintained her independence, continuing to live alone in her small house just a few blocks from my parents. Despite her age, she kept an immaculate garden, volunteered at the local library, and hosted a monthly book club. She was fiercely independent, but also infinitely kind, the type of person who remembered every neighbor's birthday and always had fresh cookies ready for visitors. Recently, though, I had noticed changes. At 78, Grandma Eleanor was beginning to slow down. She developed arthritis in her hands, making her beloved crafting more difficult. Her blood pressure required daily medication, and sometimes she seemed more forgetful than usual. Despite these challenges, she never complained, facing each day with the same grace and optimism she'd always shown. Little did I know that her declining health would become the excuse my family needed to cast her aside when something more important came along. The first warning sign came during a typical family dinner 1 week before the doorbell incident. Kyle arrived late as usual, but with an announcement that would set everything in motion. "Jessica and I are moving back home for a while," he declared, referring to his girlfriend of 3 months. "The tech company downsized and they let go of my entire department. It's their loss, obviously." My mother, Patricia, practically glowed at this news. "Oh, honey, your old room is just as you left it. We can redecorate it for both of you. It will be wonderful having you home again." I noticed my father nodding enthusiastically, while Grandma Eleanor quietly continued eating her mashed potatoes. No one asked Kyle about his job search plans or suggested he find an affordable apartment like any other 30-year-old would do. Instead, my parents immediately shifted to accommodating him as though he were still a teenager. 3 days later, I received a concerning call from my mother. "Madeline, we may need to ask for your help with Grandma Eleanor," she said, her voice carefully measured. "Just for a little while." "What kind of help?" I asked, immediately suspicious. My mother rarely asked me for anything, unless she had exhausted all other options. "Well, with Kyle and Jessica moving in, we're a bit tight on space. You know our house only has 3 bedrooms, and Grandma has the largest guest room with the private bathroom. Kyle and Jessica really need their privacy." Her voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. They were considering displacing my grandmother to make room for my adult brother and his girlfriend. "Mom, are you seriously suggesting Grandma Eleanor should move out so Kyle can have her room?" I asked incredulously. "Don't be dramatic, Madeline. It would just be temporary, and Grandma needs more care these days anyway. You have that spare sofa in your living room, right?" I was speechless. My 1-bedroom apartment was barely 700 square feet. I didn't even have a proper guest room, just a small living area with a sofa. Meanwhile, my parents' house had over 3,000 square feet, including a finished basement that could easily be converted into a space for Kyle. "Mom, this is insane. Grandma has lived with you for 3 years since selling her house. She helps with the cooking and housekeeping. She contributes to the bills. You can't just throw her out." "Nobody is throwing anyone out," my mother said defensively. "We're just rearranging to accommodate everyone's needs. Kyle is going through a difficult time right now." The conversation ended with nothing resolved, but I had a sinking feeling about what was coming. Still, I never imagined they would take such drastic action without warning. So when my doorbell rang frantically at 5:30 that Wednesday morning, I was completely unprepared for what I would find. Rushing to the door in my pajamas, I opened it to discover Grandma Eleanor sitting in her wheelchair, looking confused and upset, surrounded by 2 hastily packed suitcases and a few plastic bags. Before I could even process the scene, my phone rang. It was my father. "We dropped Mom off at your place," he said without preamble, his voice unnervingly casual, as if he were discussing a grocery delivery. "Kyle needed to move in immediately, and Jessica is allergic to some of Mom's perfumes, so this worked out best for everyone." "You did what?" I nearly shouted into the phone. "Dad, it's 5:30 in the morning. You just left her at my doorstep without warning." "We told you we needed your help," he replied coolly. "Besides, Mom was already awake. She gets up early anyway." Looking at my grandmother, I could see she was still in her nightgown under a hastily thrown-on coat. Her white hair uncombed, her eyes red from either crying or lack of sleep, or both. "Did you at least bring all her medications, her clothes, her personal items?" I demanded. "We packed what she needs," my father said dismissively. "The rest can come later. Kyle and Jessica need to settle in today, and we need to clear out Mom's things from the room." After ending the call, I knelt beside my grandmother, fighting back tears of rage. "Grandma, I'm so sorry about this. Let's get you inside and comfortable." Grandma Eleanor reached out with a trembling hand to touch my cheek. "Don't worry about me, dear. I don't want to be a burden. They said you agreed to this arrangement." My heart shattered. Not only had they abandoned her at dawn, but they had lied to her, making her believe I was expecting her. The betrayal was unimaginable. As I helped her inside, I noticed how little they had sent with her. 2 suitcases containing some clothing, many items mismatched or inappropriate for the season. A plastic bag held some toiletries, but I immediately spotted that her blood pressure medication was missing. Another bag contained a few framed photographs and her Bible, but none of her cherished craft supplies or books. Her knitting needles, recipe books, photo albums, and the quilt she'd made with my grandfather during their first year of marriage were all left behind. Items that weren't just possessions, but pieces of her identity and history. The most heartbreaking moment came when I found a small note tucked into her purse, written in her shaky handwriting. "Remember not to be a bother to Madeline. Take up as little space as possible." Looking into her eyes, I saw something I'd never associated with my strong, independent grandmother: resignation. The sparkle that had always defined her was dimmed, replaced by shame and confusion. "I'm just a burden now," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Your mother said the stairs were getting too dangerous for me anyway, and my room would be better used by someone younger." In that moment, staring at my grandmother, who had been discarded like an unwanted piece of furniture to make room for the golden child, something hardened within me. This wasn't just about poor planning or thoughtlessness. This was about the systematic devaluing of a woman who had given everything to her family, now deemed disposable, when someone more important needed her space. My apartment wasn't prepared for an elderly person with mobility issues, especially on such short notice. The bathroom door was too narrow for Grandma Eleanor's wheelchair, the kitchen counters too high for her to use comfortably, and my bedroom was the only private space in the entire apartment. "You take the bedroom, Grandma," I insisted, already moving my things out. "I'll sleep on the sofa." "I couldn't possibly take your bed, Madeline," she protested. "The sofa is fine for me." "Absolutely not. The bedroom has better access to the bathroom, and the mattress will be better for your back. It's decided." That first night was challenging. I stayed awake listening to Grandma Eleanor crying softly in my bedroom, trying to muffle the sound with a pillow. My sofa was too short for my 5'8" frame, leaving my feet dangling uncomfortably off the edge. But physical discomfort paled in comparison to the fury and helplessness I felt. The next morning, I called my workplace to request emergency personal days. As a designer for a small firm, I had some flexibility, but I knew this would impact my income and standing. Still, there was no choice. Grandma needed her medication, proper clothing, and emotional support. I called my parents repeatedly, demanding they bring Grandma's medications and remaining belongings. My mother answered once, promising they would get to it when things settled down, as if my grandmother's health was an afterthought. "Kyle is still moving his things in, and Jessica needs help rearranging the furniture," my mother explained. "We'll bring Mom's things next week." "Mom, Grandma needs her blood pressure medication today," I insisted, "and her arthritis cream, her reading glasses, her support shoes. These aren't optional items." "You can just get new prescriptions, can't you? There's a pharmacy near your apartment." After 3 days of unreturned calls, I took Grandma Eleanor to her doctor, explaining the situation and getting new prescriptions written. The doctor was visibly concerned about the sudden upheaval in her living situation. "Stability is important at your grandmother's age," he told me privately. "This kind of disruption can have real health consequences. Her blood pressure is already elevated today." Meanwhile, Grandma Eleanor tried desperately not to be a burden. She insisted on helping with meals despite the kitchen being uncomfortably designed for her. She apologized constantly for taking up space and causing trouble. "I'm sorry about the bathroom, dear," she said after struggling to navigate the small space. "Maybe we could put a chair in the shower. I don't want you spending money on renovations for me." Her sleep was restless. I often heard her moving around at night struggling with discomfort or anxiety. During the day, she tried to maintain a brave face, but I caught her staring at the phone, perhaps hoping for a call from my parents that never came. "They're just busy with Kyle getting settled," she would say, making excuses for their abandonment. "Moving is always chaotic." I began making small modifications to my apartment, installing a grab bar in the shower, rearranging furniture to create wider pathways, placing commonly used items at accessible heights. Each change was met with profuse gratitude from Grandma, which only made me angrier at my family for putting her in this position. One evening, after a particularly difficult day where Grandma had struggled with pain in her hands, I found her looking at old photographs she'd managed to bring with her. "Your grandfather built our house, did you know that?" she said quietly. "Not all at once, but room by room over the years. The bedroom I had at your parents' house, he added that when we found out we were expecting your father. He said every new chapter deserves new walls to contain it." I sat beside her, noticing the tears she was trying to hide. "I thought that room would be mine until the end," she continued. "I know it's silly to get attached to spaces, but after your grandfather passed, those walls held all I had left of him." That night, I made a decision. This wasn't a temporary inconvenience to be endured. This was a fundamental injustice that needed to be addressed. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house, determined to confront them about their treatment of Grandma Eleanor. My parents' two-story suburban home looked exactly as it always had: perfectly maintained lawn, freshly painted shutters, new seasonal wreath on the front door. The normality of it made their actions seem even more surreal. How could people who cared so much about appearances treat family with such callousness? I walked in without knocking, using the key I'd had since high school. In the living room, my mother was arranging flowers, while my father read the newspaper in his recliner, a picture of domestic tranquility that made my blood boil. "Madeline," my mother exclaimed, looking startled. "We weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I replied coldly. Just like Grandma wasn't expecting to be dumped at my doorstep before sunrise last week. My father lowered his newspaper with a sigh. "You're being dramatic. We told you we needed your help with Mom temporarily." "Temporarily? You dropped her off with 2 bags of mismatched clothes, no medications, and none of her personal belongings. That doesn't sound temporary. That sounds like abandonment." "Lower your voice," my mother hissed. "Kyle and Jessica might hear you." As if on cue, Kyle sauntered into the living room, wearing sweatpants, despite it being past noon. At 30, my brother still carried himself with the entitled air of a teenager who expected the world to accommodate his every whim. "What's the drama about?" he asked, grabbing an apple from the coffee table. "The drama," I said, turning to face him, "is about you taking Grandma's room when there are plenty of other options in this house." Kyle shrugged. "She's old. She needs more care anyway. It makes more sense for her to be with you." "More care? You mean the care she was providing herself perfectly well in her room here? The room she's lived in for 3 years?" "She was always making noise early in the morning," came a new voice. Jessica Kyle's girlfriend appeared in the doorway. Tall, blonde, and perpetually dissatisfied, she'd been dating Kyle for only 3 months, but already acted like she co-owned the house. "Her TV was too loud," Jessica continued. "And that room has the best natural light for my yoga practice. Plus all those old person creams and medications made the bathroom smell weird." I stared at her in disbelief. "You displaced an elderly woman because her arthritis cream inconvenienced your yoga routine." My mother jumped in. "Now Madeline Jessica has very specific needs for her wellness routine, and the room is much better utilized now." Better utilized, I repeated. Show me what you've done with it. Despite their reluctance, I pushed past them and headed upstairs to what had been Grandma Eleanor's room. What I found made me physically sick. The warm, thoughtfully decorated space my grandmother had created was completely transformed. Her handmade curtains were gone, replaced by modern blackout blinds. The walls, once adorned with family photographs and artwork, now featured mass-produced inspirational quotes and yoga poses. The antique dresser that had belonged to my great-grandmother was nowhere to be seen. "Where are Grandma's things?" I demanded. "Her furniture, her crafts, her clothes?" My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We had to make room," my father finally said. "We sold some pieces that weren't being used much." "You sold her antiques without her permission." "They were just collecting dust," Kyle interjected. "And Jessica's father knows someone who pays good money for vintage stuff." Moving to the closet, I threw open the doors, finding it filled with Kyle and Jessica's clothes. The cedar chest that had contained my grandmother's handmade quilts was gone. In the adjacent bathroom, all traces of my grandmother had been erased, replaced by expensive organic skincare products and a ridiculous amount of supplements. "Where's the chest with Grandma's quilts?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "The one Grandpa made for her." More uncomfortable silence. "We put some things in storage," my mother finally said. "Others we donated. She doesn't need all that stuff in your small apartment." "And the record player, her vinyl collection that Grandpa gave her." Kyle at least had the decency to look slightly ashamed. "We sold those to a collector. Old records take up a lot of space, and she wasn't really using them anymore." I felt physically ill. These weren't just possessions. They were pieces of my grandmother's history, tangible connections to her life and marriage, and my family had treated them as disposable inconveniences. "What exactly is your long-term plan here?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Grandma can't live on my sofa forever." My mother brightened, apparently relieved to move to practical matters. "Actually, we've been researching some nice assisted living facilities. There's one across town that seems very pleasant." "Assisted living? She doesn't need assisted living. She was living independently until you decided her room was more valuable than she is." "Don't be ridiculous," my father cut in. "Mom is getting older. She needs professional care." The stairs here were getting dangerous for her. "The stairs she managed perfectly well until last week. The ones she's been climbing for 3 years without incident." My mother pulled out a brochure from a side table drawer, clearly having anticipated this conversation. "Look how nice this place is. They have activities medical staff on site, and she'll be with people her own age." I glanced at the brochure, noting the exorbitant monthly fee listed at the bottom. "And how exactly are you planning to pay for this luxury elder care?" Another uncomfortable exchange of glances between my parents. "Well," my father said slowly, "Mom's house has been sitting empty since she moved in with us. It's just collecting dust and costing money in taxes and maintenance. We thought it might be time to sell it." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. This wasn't just about Kyle needing a room. This was a calculated financial decision. Sell Grandma's house, use the proceeds to park her in an institution, and free themselves of responsibility while keeping the golden boy comfortable. "She is not a piece of furniture you can put in storage when it doesn't match your decor anymore," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "She's a person who deserves dignity and respect, especially from her own family." I turned to leave, pausing at the doorway to deliver one final thought. Grandma may be staying with me for now, but this conversation isn't over. Not by a long shot. 2 months after Grandma Eleanor moved into my apartment, I decided to visit her old neighborhood. I wanted to check on her house and perhaps retrieve some personal items that might have been left behind. What I learned that day changed everything. Mrs. Janet Wilson had been my grandmother's neighbor for over 20 years. When she spotted me outside Grandma's house, she hurried over, concern etched on her face. "Madeline, how is Eleanor doing?" I've been so worried since they took her away so suddenly. We sat on Janet's porch as she revealed the truth my family had hidden. Kyle hadn't simply lost his job in a downsizing. He'd been fired for ethical violations involving company funds. Jessica wasn't just his girlfriend of 3 months. They had secretly married shortly after meeting a fact they'd hidden from everyone. I overheard them talking on the porch last month, Janet explained. They weren't just planning to sell your grandmother's house. They want to sell your parents' house, too. What? That doesn't make sense, I said, confused. Why would my parents sell their own home? Janet lowered her voice. Kyle and Jessica are starting some kind of business venture. They need capital. The plan was to move everyone, including your parents, into smaller accommodations and use the proceeds from both house sales to fund their startup. I was stunned. My parents agreed to this. I don't think they know the full extent of it. I glimpsed a text on Kyle's phone when he was over here checking on your grandmother's house. He told Jessica that they'd convinced the old folks after the first house sells. He called it a stepping stone approach. This revelation was sickening, but it led me to investigate further. Among Grandma Eleanor's belongings I'd brought from my parents' house was a folder of important documents. Reviewing them that evening, I discovered something critical. My grandmother's house wasn't solely in her name as I'd assumed. After my grandfather's death, she had added my father as a joint owner to simplify things when I'm gone, as she had put it. However, a call to a real estate attorney confirmed what I suspected. Without my grandmother's signature, the house couldn't be sold. My father could not unilaterally make that decision while she was still alive. Digging deeper into Kyle's business ventures, I uncovered a pattern of failed startups and mounting debt. His previous 2 business attempts had ended in bankruptcy, with investors losing significant sums. This new venture appeared to be another poorly conceived plan, but this time with family property as collateral. The final piece fell into place when I discovered marriage records confirming that Kyle and Jessica had indeed married 6 weeks ago in a private ceremony. The timing coincided perfectly with the beginning of their plan to move into my parents' house and displace my grandmother. Armed with this information, I decided to confront my family during their Sunday dinner, a tradition I hadn't participated in since Grandma's unceremonious removal. I arrived unannounced, bringing printed evidence of everything I'd discovered. The scene in the dining room was surreal. My parents, Kyle and Jessica, were eating pot roast, the same meal Grandma Eleanor had often prepared, acting as if nothing was wrong, as if an essential family member wasn't missing from the table. "Madeline!" my mother exclaimed. "What a surprise! There's plenty if you'd like to join us." "I'm not here to eat," I said, placing the folder on the table. "I'm here to discuss Kyle and Jessica's plan to sell not just Grandma's house, but yours as well." The stunned silence confirmed my suspicions. My parents' expressions shifted from surprise to confusion, while Kyle's face hardened with anger. "What are you talking about?" my father demanded. I laid out everything I'd discovered: the secret marriage, the failed business ventures, the mounting debt, and the plan to use both properties to fund their newest scheme. "You were never planning for Grandma's displacement to be temporary," I concluded. "This was step 1 in a larger plan to exploit both her and you." My mother turned to Kyle, her face pale. "Is this true? Were you planning to sell our house too?" Kyle's response was defensive and revealing. "You two are getting older. Downsizing makes sense. We could use the capital to build something that would support all of us." "After your previous 2 business failures?" I countered. "After you were fired for misusing company funds." My father's face reddened. "You were downsized. You told us the entire department was let go." "Details?" Kyle dismissed with a wave. "The point is, we have an opportunity here. Jessica's father has connections in the startup world. With enough initial investment, we could make millions." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "My father says property is dead capital. You have to make it work for you." "By displacing your own mother?" I asked my father directly. "By selling her home out from under her?" "We would never," my mother began, but Kyle interrupted. She doesn't need a house. She's one old woman. That property could be working for all of us instead of just sitting there. The mask had slipped, revealing the cold calculation behind their actions. My parents sat in shocked silence as their golden child exposed his true intentions. Well, I said, gathering my documents. I've already spoken with the lawyer. Grandma's house cannot be sold without her signature, which she will not be giving. Furthermore, I'm petitioning to become her legal guardian to protect her interests, since her current family has demonstrated they cannot be trusted to do so. Kyle slammed his fist on the table. You've always been jealous, always trying to make me look bad because Mom and Dad see my potential. I looked at him steadily. No, Kyle. I've always seen exactly who you are. I just never thought you'd stoop to exploiting an elderly woman, especially your own grandmother. As I left, my mother followed me to the door, her face troubled. Madeline, we never intended... We wouldn't have let him sell our house. Maybe not, I acknowledged. But you were willing to throw Grandma away for his comfort, and that says everything about your priorities. Walking to my car, I felt a strange mix of rage and clarity. The path forward wasn't just about finding suitable housing for my grandmother anymore. It was about building a new kind of family, one based on respect rather than exploitation. With the decision to become Grandma Eleanor's legal guardian came significant changes. My one-bedroom apartment clearly wasn't a long-term solution for both of us. After much consideration, I decided to sell it and use the proceeds as a down payment on a more suitable place. Finding a 2-bedroom apartment with wider doorways, an accessible bathroom, and proximity to both my office and medical facilities was challenging but necessary. The financial strain was considerable. The new apartment cost nearly $500 more in monthly rent, and the moving expenses depleted my modest savings. To make ends meet, I began taking freelance design projects in addition to my regular job, often working late into the night after Grandma had gone to bed. Some days, I survived on coffee and determination, designing custom furniture pieces for clients while researching elder law between projects. Through it all, Grandma Eleanor watched with concern. You're working too hard, dear, she would say, noticing the dark circles under my eyes. I never wanted to be such a burden. You're not a burden, Grandma, I insisted. You're family. Real family doesn't abandon each other when things get inconvenient. As the weeks passed, I noticed a gradual change in my grandmother. The initial shock and depression began to lift, replaced by something like her old spark. One morning, I found her rearranging the living room furniture while I was in the shower. The flow was all wrong, she explained when I emerged, surprised to find the sofa on the opposite wall. The morning light was being wasted. Now you can enjoy it with your coffee. She was right. The room felt more open, more welcoming. It was the first sign that my grandmother was starting to feel at home rather than just a temporary guest. A turning point came when I brought home fabric samples for a client's reupholstery project. Grandma Eleanor studied them with expert eyes, pointing out subtleties in texture and durability I hadn't noticed. This one looks lovely, but will pill within a year, she noted, rubbing the material between her fingers. This one, though, will age beautifully. Her assessment was so professional that I asked her opinion on the entire design scheme. The enthusiasm that lit up her face was worth every extra hour of work I'd put in to make our new living arrangement possible. I used to do this, you know, she said, suddenly animated. Before computer programs and Pinterest, I'd help neighbors arrange their furniture, choose colors, make spaces work better for them. That conversation sparked an idea. The next day, I brought home a sketch pad and some colored pencils. Grandma, would you help me with some concepts for this beach house renovation? The client wants something that blends modern and traditional elements. She hesitated only briefly before taking the supplies. That evening, instead of watching television, we spread papers across the dining table as Grandma sketched layout ideas. Her hands, though slowed by arthritis, moved with practiced confidence. Her designs had an elegance and practicality that modern trends often overlooked. "See how the dining area opens to both the kitchen and the view," she explained, pointing to her drawing. "Spaces should converse with each other, just like the people within them." The client loved her concepts. So did the next one and the next. Soon, incorporating Eleanor's touch became a selling point for my freelance work. My grandmother's experience and my technical knowledge complemented each other perfectly, creating designs that were both innovative and timeless. Witnessing Grandma's renewal sparked another idea. I created a simple website showcasing our collaborative designs, highlighting the intergenerational approach that made them unique. I called it Eleanor's Touch, featuring my grandmother's story and philosophy alongside our portfolio. "You're making me famous at 78. She laughed when I showed her the site. But I could see the pride in her eyes, the recognition that her knowledge and taste were valuable, not disposable. As her confidence grew, Grandma Eleanor began venturing out more. I connected her with the local senior center, where she started teaching a weekly crafting class. The joy she found in sharing her skills with others added another dimension to her recovery. "My students are all between 60 and 90, she told me excitedly after her first class. "Some have never held a needle before. Can you imagine reaching that age without ever creating something with your hands?" One Thursday evening, I arrived home to find Grandma in deep conversation with Mrs. Abernathy, an 80-year-old widow from her class. They were comparing knitting patterns at the dining table, teacups and cookies between them. "Hope you don't mind," Grandma said. "Dorothy lost her husband last year and doesn't get many visitors. I thought we could all have dinner together." That impromptu dinner became a tradition. Every Thursday, Grandma invited someone from her circle who needed company. Our apartment became a gathering place for elders whose families were distant or uninvolved. I watched in amazement as my grandmother, who had been discarded by her own family, created a new community based on mutual respect and companionship. Our professional collaboration received unexpected attention when a local design magazine featured us in an article titled "Designing Across Generations." The writer was fascinated by our partnership, highlighting how Eleanor's traditional craftsmanship complemented my contemporary approach. In an industry obsessed with the newest trend, the article read, "Eleanor and Madeline Morgan demonstrate that true innovation often comes from honoring the knowledge of the past while embracing the tools of the future." Orders increased after the publication. Clients specifically requested the intergenerational approach, appreciating the depth it brought to their spaces. What had begun as a way to include my grandmother in my work had evolved into a distinctive brand advantage. The increased income allowed us to make our apartment truly comfortable. We installed better grab bars in the bathroom, purchased a quality adjustable bed for Grandma's room, and invested in ergonomic tools that made crafting easier for her arthritic hands. More importantly, Grandma's health improved. Her blood pressure stabilized, her sleep became more regular, and the deep sadness that had haunted her eyes began to fade. Having purpose restored something essential that had been taken from her that early morning when she was abandoned at my door. One Sunday evening, as we prepared for the week ahead, Grandma Eleanor looked up from her knitting with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "when they left me at your doorstep, I thought it was the end of my useful life. I felt like an old coat being donated because it no longer fit properly." She set her needles down. "I never imagined it would be the beginning of something so meaningful." I reached across to squeeze her hand. "They threw away a treasure," I told her. "Their loss my gain." She smiled, the confidence of a woman who knows her worth fully restored in her eyes. "Our gain," she corrected. "Definitely our gain." 1 year after that life-changing doorbell ring, Eleanor's Touch had become a respected name in Seattle's interior design community. What began as a simple website showcasing our collaborative work had evolved into a boutique design service with a 2-month waiting list. Clients valued our unique approach, combining Eleanor's traditional craftsmanship with my contemporary training. The transformation in our lives was remarkable. We had moved again this time to a ground-floor, two-bedroom condo with accessible features throughout. Eleanor's health had stabilized, her spirit fully rekindled. At 79, she had found a new purpose as both a designer and a mentor to other seniors rediscovering their creative talents. Our Thursday community dinners had expanded to include 15 regular attendees, creating a supportive network of elders who refused to be relegated to society's margins. The local news featured our gathering in a segment about combating isolation among seniors, bringing even more attention to our work. Then came the opportunity that validated everything we'd built. A prominent home renovation show contacted us about featuring Eleanor's touch in an upcoming episode about innovative design approaches. They were particularly interested in our intergenerational collaboration and how it created spaces that were both beautiful and functional across age groups. The morning of the interview, Eleanor wore her favorite navy dress with a handcrafted brooch, looking every bit the respected designer she had become. As the cameras set up in our living room, she showed no sign of the broken woman who had arrived on my doorstep a year earlier. "You're changing perceptions about aging and creativity," the interviewer told her. "What inspired this journey?" Eleanor answered with diplomatic grace. "Life takes unexpected turns. Sometimes what feels like an ending is actually a beginning in disguise." She didn't mention being abandoned by her family, transforming her pain into wisdom instead. The segment aired to positive reception, generating more interest in our services and philosophy. Eleanor was invited to speak at a conference on aging well, sharing her perspective on the importance of purpose and creativity in later years. Life had found a new, fulfilling rhythm when the unexpected happened. I arrived home one evening to find 3 familiar figures standing awkwardly outside our condo door: my father, mother, and Kyle, looking nothing like the confident, entitled people who had discarded Grandma Eleanor a year ago. My father's hair had grayed significantly. My mother's carefully maintained appearance had slipped, her clothes wrinkled and her hair unstyled. Kyle, without Jessica beside him, seemed smaller somehow, his swagger replaced by a hunched posture. "Madeline," my mother began tentatively. "We saw Eleanor on television. She looks wonderful." "She is wonderful," I replied, making no move to invite them in. "What are you doing here?" My father cleared his throat. "We were hoping to speak with both of you. It's important." Inside, I found Grandma Eleanor already setting the table for dinner, having spotted them from the window. "Let them in, Madeline," she said calmly. "I think it's time we heard what they have to say." The story emerged over a meal they barely touched. Kyle's business venture had failed spectacularly. Jessica, discovering there would be no quick fortune, had filed for divorce after just 10 months of marriage. The investor who had initially shown interest turned out to be running a scam of his own, leaving Kyle with massive debt. He used our house as collateral without fully explaining the terms, my father admitted, looking years older than he had a year ago. "The bank is foreclosing next month." My mother couldn't meet our eyes. "We have nowhere to go. We thought, perhaps, just temporarily." The irony wasn't lost on anyone at the table. The same people who had discarded Grandma Eleanor temporarily were now seeking temporary shelter themselves. Kyle spoke for the first time, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "I messed up. Everything I touched turned to disaster. Jessica took what little we had left in the divorce." I waited for Grandma Eleanor's response, ready to support whatever decision she made. To my surprise, she showed neither angry triumph nor hasty forgiveness. Instead, she regarded them with calm assessment. "Being discarded is a painful experience," she said evenly. "It forces you to reevaluate everything you thought was certain in life." "Would you agree, Richard?" she asked my father directly. He nodded, unable to speak. "A year ago, you decided I was a burden, an inconvenience to be removed for someone more valuable." Her voice remained steady. You didn't consult me, respect my feelings, or consider alternatives. You simply disposed of me." My mother began to cry silently. Kyle stared at his plate. "What you're asking now," Grandma continued, "is for us to show you the compassion you couldn't extend to me. We know we don't deserve it," my father whispered. Grandma Eleanor turned to me. "What do you think, Madeline? This is your home too." I considered the question carefully. I think forgiveness doesn't require enabling bad behavior, and compassion doesn't mean putting ourselves at risk. She nodded, turning back to my parents. "We won't turn you away like you did me. That's not who we are. But we also won't sacrifice our well-being for people who haven't demonstrated they've truly changed." The relief on their faces quickly tempered as she continued. "Here's what we can offer. Madeline will help you find an affordable apartment nearby. Richard, there's a part-time position at our workshop assisting with furniture restoration. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work. Patricia, the senior center, needs administrative help 3 days a week." She turned to Kyle. "As for you, there's a program for entrepreneurs who failed and need to rebuild. It teaches fiscal responsibility and ethical business practices. That's your only option if you want our help." My parents accepted immediately. Kyle hesitated, his pride struggling with his desperation before finally nodding. "One more thing," Grandma Eleanor added. "This isn't about punishment, it's about respect. You treated me as if my age made me worthless, but this past year has proven the opposite. Age isn't a burden, it's an accumulation of wisdom if you're wise enough to recognize it." As they prepared to leave, my mother paused at the door. "Your home is beautiful," she said quietly. "You've created something remarkable here." "Yes," Grandma replied, "we have, not despite our challenges, but because of how we face them together." After they left, I turned to my grandmother in amazement. "You're helping them after everything they did." She smiled, the wisdom of her years evident in her eyes. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing yourself to be hurt again. It means releasing the power that person's actions have over your happiness. I'm not helping them for their sake, but for mine and yours. Bitterness is a poor companion in old age. In the months that followed, our family began a careful reconstruction. My parents moved into a small apartment 10 blocks away, working the jobs Grandma had suggested. They attended our Thursday community dinners initially as awkward participants, gradually becoming contributors. Kyle struggled with the rehabilitation program, but eventually embraced its lessons, starting over with realistic expectations and ethical guidelines. The transformation wasn't instant or perfect. Trust rebuilds slowly, one consistent action at a time. But gradually, something new emerged from the ashes of what was lost. 6 months after their return, we hosted a special Sunday dinner in our condo. Grandma Eleanor, now 80, prepared her famous pot roast with my mother's assistance. My father and I set the table while Kyle helped arrange chairs for our expanded family, which now included several adopted elders from our community. Before we ate, Grandma Eleanor raised her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to the understanding that family isn't what you're born into, but what you build through respect, love, and showing up for each other every day." Looking around that table, I realized we had come full circle. The woman who had been discarded like trash had become the cornerstone of a new, stronger foundation. She wasn't a burden, but a treasure, not despite her age, but because of the wisdom those years had given her. I've learned that family isn't a given, but a gift we create through our choices every day. Sometimes, the most painful beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings if we have the courage to rewrite the story when life hands us an unexpected blank page. So, what about you? Are you brave enough to rewrite your own story when life takes an unexpected turn? Leave a comment below sharing a time when a painful situation eventually led to positive change in your life. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes being thrown away is just the universe making space for something better. Thank you for listening to our story, and remember that your worst day might just be the beginning of your most beautiful chapter.